Utah County Clerk Auditor. Prior to joining government, I was a service engineer for Caterpillar, with big yellow tractors and diesel engines. So I graduated with a degree in automotive technology from Weber State University from their College of Technology and Engineering. So I tend to be a more technical person. And I joined government. I left the private sector and went into government because I saw that government systems were incredibly outdated and inefficient, paper-based and manual, and they relied very heavily on manual human labor, which increases your error rate significantly. And so having worked in the private sector and seen how much efficiency and processes and automation can improve things through manufacturing and engineering, I left my corporate career to move back here to Utah County because I grew up here. I was born and raised in Utah County, graduated from high school here, and I knew that this was the best place in the world to live and raise a family. So as I started having kids and they started getting older, I moved back here to Utah as my oldest was entering kindergarten so that I could raise my family here near their grandparents and their cousins, and really to be where I found that I had the best chance at growing up to be successful. So there's some amazing things about Utah County. There's something called the Opportunity Index, and it rates your zip code, and it says based on the zip code you grew up in, what are your chances of climbing the socioeconomic ladder and becoming successful in life? And one of the most amazing things about Utah County is that we actually rank higher on the Opportunity Index than any other county in the country. So in Utah County, it doesn't matter what zip code you grow up in, you have an opportunity to achieve success. So I came back from the corporate world and I saw that our county government had not progressed at all since the mid to late 90s. We still had literally the same clip art on our websites that was built onto those websites in the late 90s. So I left the private sector to join government to say, hey, you know what? We are growing at an incredibly rapid rate. If we want to keep Utah County the best place in the world to live and raise a family, we need to ensure that we are taking advantage of new technology, new opportunities, and really utilizing the resources that are here in our county. Ran for county clerk auditor, and I started immediately looking at innovation and looking at ways to automate things. One of those examples is remote marriage licenses. It did not make any sense to me that two people that wanted to get married had to take a day off work before their wedding so that they could go down to a government office between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday to get a permission slip from the government for their bishop to marry them. None of that makes sense to me in today's world. So we launched an online marriage license portal. And we launched that portal in October of 2019. That was our beta test. We went live with all marriage licenses using an online portal in January of 2020. And when that happened, I had a world of people that said I had a solution looking for a problem. And then 2 months later, COVID hit. And all of a sudden, I was a revolutionary who had foreseen the future and we had remote services. There was a period of time that we were literally the only county in the country that could issue you a marriage license. So automatically, we became the go-to for everybody in the state of Utah. And to this day, we process more marriage licenses here in Utah County than any other county in the state. Because the way the state law is written is you just need a marriage license from any county in the state of Utah to get married in the state of Utah. So Utah County has now become the premier destination for marriage licenses because you don't have to make an appointment and you don't have to take a day off work and you don't have to show up in person. As long as you and your significant other have a cell signal or a Wi-Fi signal, you can get your marriage license. Now, Utah County is really the ideal place in the nation to be able to implement some of these technologies. We really need to take our place as the leader in smart technologies globally right now. We've got a few factors that play into that. Number one, we tend to have a very highly educated population. We have a really high rate of high school graduation. We've got good college rates. We have good graduate rates. So we've got a a very, very well educated and informed population. There's one. Number two, almost everybody in Utah County is connected. We really don't have any large swaths of our county that aren't connected. A lot of large swaths of population that don't have access to the internet. That's another reason. But there's two other reasons that are even more compelling. Number one, we have one of the youngest counties in the nation. Does anybody have a guess on what the average age of a citizen of Utah County is? Yeah?
26.
Close, but that's a little high. 23. The average age of someone living in our county is 23 years old. One of the youngest in the country. I think there's maybe only one or two counties, and they're not even that much lower than us. 23 years old. So we have a highly educated population that's well connected to the internet, and they're very young and tech savvy. And then the other really compelling reason is we are the home of Silicon Slopes. I mean, this is where tech startups go to become unicorns, right? We've really got the talent that is necessary to build what we need. So there's a really good opportunity for us to become the leaders in smart government, whether it be smart cities, smart counties, or smart state. We really should be the leaders in smart government. But there's even another reason for us to lead the way. And that's because we put a lot of value here in our county on individual freedoms and individual liberty and privacy. And as we move towards a connected society, it is imperative that we do so in the correct way. So I'll give you an example. As we were building our online marriage license portal, we had to verify people's identity. That's one of the things that you have to do. You have to prove that they are who they say they are. And not only that, you also have to make sure that they're over the age of 18 so that you're not facilitating underage marriages. So in order to do that, we looked for a system that takes a picture of the government-issued ID and takes a selfie video and compares the two. And we need to make sure that it's a valid government-issued ID and their identity. But we purposefully built the system so that we don't retain that information. When we scan your government-issued ID, we're pinging a database to make sure that that really is a valid ID and that the information on that ID matches what's in the database. We're making sure that your driver's license number matches your name and your address and your picture. We want to make sure that that's a valid ID. But once we've done that, we're not actually storing that information, we're just looking to verify that that information is correct. And then when we take that selfie video to ensure that your face matches the face on that ID, the same thing, we're not actually keeping that information, we're just giving the application a yes or a no. And if it has a yes, it moves on. But we don't store that information, because once you've got your marriage license, we don't want to have all of that information in a database that could be mined in the future for nefarious reasons, that could be used improperly by law enforcement. Keep in mind, at the county level, we have the attorney's office that prosecutes most crime, and the sheriff's department. So I want to ensure that your information is not being used improperly. So I think as we look at this, because we are a place and a county and a state that values privacy and individual liberty, we need to ensure that as we're building these smart government systems, we're doing it in a way that maybe verifies information but doesn't store that information so that it can be hacked later or used improperly by government later. So as we go through and look at integrating systems with whether those come to smart water use, that's going to be a big one, right? We're the second most arid state in the nation, and we've got a growing population. We're growing at a rapid rate. We need to find better ways to manage our water usage. We can utilize technology to do that, but we can also do it in a way that doesn't store people's data and preserves their privacy. And I think that is just as important. On top of the underlying importance of that, in order to get broad adoption and broad acceptance from our community, we are going to have to show that these systems are built that way. So we can get more buy-in from government and from citizens if we're ensuring privacy and property rights, and on top of that, we are setting a standard for the nation, right? If we are the ones leading the way in these applications, if Silicon Slopes has the companies that create the solutions that the world is going to adopt, we have an obligation to ensure that they're creating those solutions in a way that is true to natural rights, that we as a community understand, rather than an overreaching Big Brother Orwellian sort of way. Because both, as we move into smart government, both systems are going to be competing against one another. And we can lead the way to ensure that we're creating the systems that guarantee privacy and guarantee rights, rather than ones that wholeheartedly take those rights away. So I think those are some of the biggest issues that we face. That's actually one reason why I am so keen on introducing this innovation here in Utah County. I tend to lean more towards, obviously, as you can tell by my words, I lean more towards individual liberty and natural rights. And so I know that moving to a connected system is inevitable, and I want to ensure that we're doing it in a way that ensures privacy. So if we're going to move to e-identity documents, I would love us to see e-identity documents that the owner has the rights to, and they give people access to that information with permission. Now let's look at those e-identity documents. You see a large swath of people that are really afraid of the electronic ID. I mean, how many of you have seen like flyers or social media groups of people that are saying that getting an electronic ID document is a really scary thing? Have you guys seen that? Some of you have. Okay, so I've seen those. The irony of that is, let's say that you want to go into an establishment. Let's say you want to go into a bar. When you have to go to that bar and they want to see your government-issued ID, you pull out that government-issued ID and you show it to them. And they're not just verifying your age. They have your weight, they have your height, they have your eye color, but they also have your birthday. They have your address. They have your driver's license number, things that they could use to steal your identity or to stalk you. They have all that information on that ID. We actually retain privacy if we move towards an e-document or an e-identity, that all we have to do is show them the picture so that they can verify it's me, and the age. And they don't even have to know your age. They just need to know that you're over 21, right? So if we can move to the spot where you were able to show them your identity and say, you know, pull out your phone like you would an Apple Pay, and you could say, you know, I want an identity over 21, and you could show that to them, and they could scan that and say, yes, this is directly from the government-approved app that says this person is over the age of 21, and they can see the picture or they can see my face. We're actually retaining that information. But if we build it in a way that allows law enforcement to mine people's personal information, the public will fight back against it. So we have to build these systems. Another example of that is with payments like cryptocurrency. How many of you followed the saga of the truckers in Canada? Okay, on that, when their bank accounts were all frozen, people started donating to them in cryptocurrency, right? So then what did the government in Canada do at that point? They sent notification from the courts to all of the crypto wallets saying, we need you to freeze these accounts, right? And they weren't just freezing the accounts of the truckers, they were freezing the accounts of every single one of the people who donated to the truckers. However, there was one app whose response to the Canadian government was, I'm sorry, we are an open source software, and these are user-controlled wallets. We can't freeze their account, even if we wanted to. Sorry. Those are the type of systems that people are going to want to adopt, right? A system that is built so that an overreaching authority can't stop them. So we have a great opportunity here in Utah County. We've got the demographics that give us the ability to have broad adoption of great solutions, and we have a citizenry who respects natural rights, privacy, and will demand that we marry those two together. And then, as chance would have it, we have the talent right here in our county, most of it right here in Lehi at Silicon Slopes, to be able to build the solutions that work for us and for our future. Those are more with a lot of that has to do with the public-facing systems. Now, on top of that, we can actually create a more lean, efficient, and therefore a more cost-effective government by adopting similar systems internally, right? Rather than using paper-based automated systems that rely on manual labor, our number one cost of government is salary, benefits, and retirement pensions for government employees. If we can create systems that automate our processes, we can also lead the way in efficient, lean, and cost-effective government. So those are really the areas that I have tried to work on. For the most part, most people are appreciative of that. Every now and again, we have someone that just the technology in general scares them. And with those people, that's where we need to help them understand that our goal is to ensure their privacy. So that's kind of an overview of me and what I've been working on. Mainly, I'll just maybe throw out to you some solutions that in the last couple of years that I've been involved in government, some of the things we've done. Some of them are going to be just no-brainers. An example of that is contracts. We as a county process just over 1,000 contracts a year. When I became the county clerk auditor, we were getting wet ink signatures, 3 to 4 signatures on every contract. We had somebody literally with a full-time salary, benefits, and a pension walking around the county getting signatures. So one of the first things we did is implement DocuSign. Right. It's very simple, common technology, widely accepted, legally binding. We now do the vast majority of our contracts. There's a few that deal with land titling that we still do by ink, but 99% of our contracts are now done using DocuSign. We've worked on creating paperless systems for accounts payable and accounts receivable. Prior to 2019, the elections office didn't accept credit cards. We actually still have a few offices in the county that don't accept credit cards. We're working on it. But most of them, within a month of me being in office, almost every office was accepting credit cards. I mean, it's really simple things like this. You couldn't pay the county in any way other than a check. We now can do, not only can you do credit card payments, but you can do ACH payments as well. And we worked this legislative session to get a bill passed that the state and political subdivisions, which means counties and cities, can accept cryptocurrency as payment as well. So we haven't picked our vendor yet, but we're working on it. So I'm hoping before the end of this year, we will have that vendor picked. If not next year for sure, you could pay your property taxes, for example, using cryptocurrency. So if you happen to donate to the Canadian truckers and they froze your bank accounts, you would still be able to pay your property taxes and be in good standing using a cryptocurrency wallet. That's kind of our goal there. So that will be by the end of this year or early next year. And then I think the big underlying key to all of this is government has never been required to become easy to do business with because we have no competition. For example, when you're getting your marriage license, prior to me launching an online marriage license portal, when you got married, you didn't have a choice. You couldn't get married unless you had a marriage license. And the only way to get that marriage license was to go down to the county building between 8:30 and 4:30. The second that there was a choice, people are obviously utilizing the online portal. But throughout history, government runs a monopoly. They don't have a competition. So it's imperative that we get people like myself in government who are there to try to make government more easy to work with. If we're required to be there anyway, if we're required to utilize the DMV, if we're required to utilize the treasurer's office, the county treasurer's office, or the county clerk's office, then we should make it so that you can do so as easily as possible. And then not only does that help the individual, but it actually cascades out. So think with me for a minute. If you're a young mother in Saratoga Springs, and you've got 3 children under the age of 6, and you need to get a copy of a birth certificate, and you have to load those 3 children in the car, and then you have to drive 45 minutes down to the county building, find a parking spot that is becoming less easy to find as our county grows, and then you have to drag those 3 children into the building, and you have to stand in line, fill out a piece of paper. Now you can pay with a credit card, thank goodness, but before you had to have a check or cash. Then you have to drag those kids back out, get them in the car, and drive back. You're looking to take probably a minimum, if all things go well, this is taking 2 hours out of your day. You're driving on roads that are already crowded, probably on Pioneer Crossing, which is already backed up and already crowded, and you're adding to air pollution, which is a problem in a valley that has inversions regularly. If we can make that one person's job and day easier by allowing them to order a copy of the certificate online that can either be mailed to them, or allowing them to have a digital certified copy of that document, which is an area that we're moving down, then we've just taken a car off the roads that deals with traffic, deals with air pollution, given that person 2 hours of their day back, and anyone, like my mother doesn't like to do anything online, she'd rather drive down to the county building. Well, now her line at the county building is shorter, because anyone who does feel comfortable online is now being served online, which means that she can be in and out of that building in less than 10 minutes. So we're making everybody's experience better. We're serving more citizens with less people, and we're trying to find solutions to problems that actually cascade, right? Because not only is her day easier, but my mom's day is easier. There's less cars on the road and less pollution in the air.
Those are all great points, so we're super happy we have people like you in government that are thinking of the 21st century and everything else, but it's almost laughable that it's been the way it's been, right?
Right.
Because if you're a business, you couldn't survive acting like that, you'd be gone.
Right. And that's also taking somebody from the private sector like myself that has that experience and recognizes, just like you said, if this was a business, it would be gone already. The only reason it's not is because it's a monopoly and we don't have a choice but to do business with them, right? Now, with that said, the person running against me in this primary, I'm on the ballot this year, and the person running against me in this primary, almost their entire argument against me is that I'm pro-innovation and technology and that I'm pro-smart growth. And they said we need to stop all growth and we need to go back to manual paper systems. Yes. So there are some people that this idea scares them, right?
Well, there's always people who will be stuck in the past, I'm sure.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah, you had a question, Mike?
Yeah, when it comes to educational credentials and the need to be able to have transferability there, I myself agree that that's something that the owner of that credential should open up the accessibility to the either employer or someone that's going to be able to make sure where your credentials are for your next skills and everything else like that. What are your thoughts with that? Does it echo what you had talked about earlier when it comes to the accessibility being on the part of the owner?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was about educational credentials, if any of you didn't hear those, and you wanted to know about the ownership. So with any of these types of credentials, there's 2 things that are important. Number one, when you're dealing with a credential, is there needs to be an underlying organization that gives that credential validity, right? So with our IDs, with our identity documents, all of those, the underlying agency is government. Whether you're dealing with a birth certificate, a marriage certificate, a driver's license, a passport, you've got the government, right? When you're dealing with an educational educational credential. There's a couple of areas that you can do that. Some of them are industry associations, and then the other ones are educational institutions, like a university that has credit. In a case like that, the individual should, especially if the individual earned it, they should own it. I know there has been some controversy with universities that maybe hold people's credentials, but if the people earned that credential, they should own that credential. But you're right, if they want to go to an employer, or if they want to go somewhere and utilize that credential to try to give them credibility, then they need to allow access to that. But that would be that's as simple as my transcripts from university. When I started at Caterpillar, I had to get a certified copy of my transcript in an envelope that had a stamp on it, right? And then I gave that to the employer. The employer doesn't have the ability to get those transcripts without me giving it to them. I think an online credential would be very similar. And now there is a way to do online credentialing utilizing today's technology. This is actually something that we do with our online marriage licenses. After the marriage is performed, whoever performed the marriage scans a QR code on the digital license, and it brings them to a portal for that marriage license. They fill out who they are, how they're qualified to perform that ceremony, when and where they performed that ceremony, who the witnesses were, and then they certify that wedding ceremony took place. When that happens, we issue what's called a certified digital marriage certificate. What we do there, when you look at your paper marriage certificate, what makes it authentic is that it's on like pretty paper, and it's got like purple ink, and then we use an old metal stamp to push on it and put like that raised little bit in it, and that's what makes it an official marriage certificate. We can do that in the digital world utilizing a blockchain seal. So we've done over 25,000 of these in Utah County since 2019, where you take your marriage certificate and we add an address to it. Currently we're using Ethereum because of gas fees. Like virtual gas is going up just like gas in the real world. So Ethereum is getting expensive and we're looking at moving, but to a public blockchain, you can put that address on that, and then you put a second page with it that shows a QR code, and it lists the blockchain. What you do is you can go to the blockchain and you can see that this document, as is, was sealed by Utah County government. Now, once again, to ensure privacy, we're not putting their personal information that's on their marriage certificate on a public blockchain, but what we're doing is we're putting the seal on the public blockchain to show that this is a certified document. So I actually have a copy of my marriage certificate that I can show people afterwards. You can come up and we can show this to you. I did my own so that when I show people examples, I'm not showing them someone else's information. But we have my husband and I have ours, and it in essence is an NFT. How many of you are familiar with NFTs? Okay, so it's in essence an NFT that shows you, sorry, I'm trying to pull it up. I'll pull it up afterwards when I'm not doing both. But I can show you, so we've got, basically it's like an NFT, and we've got a digital seal on that. I would love to see that go broad. There's a couple of reasons why. Number one is it's easily accessible. I can give you an example of somebody here in the county. 10:45 on a Friday night, I got a Facebook message from somebody, and they said, "Hey, I was married last year. My husband and I used your online portal to get our marriage license, and your name is on my marriage certificate. I have moved 3 times since we got married, and we thought that our marriage certificate was in the safe, and we just opened the safe and it's not there. And my 10 siblings have flown in from 5 states, and we're supposed to be getting sealed tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in the Provo Temple. The temple needs a copy of our marriage certificate to perform the temple sealing, and we don't know where our marriage certificate is. Is there any way to get us a copy before 8 a.m. tomorrow morning?" Mind, it's 10:45 p.m. on Friday night. So I replied to the message and said, "When your marriage was completed, we would have sent you an email. That email has a digitally certified copy of your marriage certificate. Go into your email that you would have used to sign up for your marriage license and search for the words marriage certificate. And 10 minutes later, I got a message and said, I just found it. Is this what it looks like? That was it. She had a screenshot. I said, that's it. Make sure you have your phone. Go to the temple tomorrow. Open that document. Show that to the temple. They'll know. And the next morning, she showed up. They said, do you have a copy of your marriage certificate? She opened it up. They looked at it. They saw it. And she was able to move on. Right? Without having to stand in line, making me pay someone overtime to show up at the building to try to get her a physical copy.
Fantastic talk. Is the state of Utah a help or a hindrance in what you're doing?
So, yeah, both actually. It depends though, because I've got some people here in the state of Utah that are huge helps. Now, your average bureaucrat does not like change. Does that shock anyone?
You have no average bureaucrats here.
Okay.
They don't
They-
like loss of power.
Right, they don't like change, but we actually have several legislators that are working with us and helping with us. So they're in the process of forming a blockchain council right now, and we have a legislator, actually Jefferson Moss from Saratoga Springs. Jefferson Moss has started a bill file called Certified Digital Documents, and he will be running that bill this next legislative session that basically tells the states that they have to recognize digitally certified documents from local entities, and also encourages the state to look at creating as many digital documents as possible to streamline services. So we've got several legislators that are in support of it, and a few bureaucrats that are in support of it. And then at the federal level, both Senator Mike Lee and Congressman John Curtis have agreed to, once Utah has that bill, and we have model legislation, to run that legislation at the federal level. So,
Nice.
yeah, so Senator Lee has been very helpful, very supportive. Congressman Curtis has been as well, Jefferson Moss. And there's a handful of other legislators that have been very helpful.
If anyone's been to China in the last 5, 10 years, I mean, you see, as you're driving down the road, every mile of the road in a city or on the freeway has literally hundreds of cameras. They're capturing everything about your car, any image of you, facial recognition, all of those things, so that they can, I think we all know that they're a horrible, privacy example, right? They're the worst. Is there a demonstrable way to help people feel like, hey, I like the use of technology, especially some of the more advanced forms of machine learning, facial recognition, all those things. I think we have lots of great examples of that improving efficiency. What's the demonstrable way to help an average citizen say, I know that they're not using or storing that information for some other use?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. So I think there's 3 ways we do that. Number 1 is we codify it. We make sure that that's in law, right? That it's in law that we're not storing these things, that these things can't be used. So we do have to have the law. Number 2 is, kind of like I said before, we have to build that into the systems so that the systems don't have the ability to store that information. So that so it's not like that's a feature that we've just turned off, that could be turned on in the future. It's got to be built into the system that privacy is there. And then number 3, we have to show them that we're utilizing this in a way that doesn't violate privacy. So the marriage license, once again, is a good example. We have to ensure that they retain digital ownership of it. So for example, if somebody deletes their PDF and they need a new one, they're gonna have to pay me to mint a new one, because we don't keep that original, right? Which is like $10. I mean, it's very affordable, but they've got to know that we're not storing that. We don't put their personal information on the blockchain for anyone else to have, and then we don't even have a way to store that identity information, right? I mean, on top of that, I don't want the liability of storing all that information, right? Because in my mind, a nefarious actor can come from the outside or the inside, and I don't want to have that liability. Right, but that's a big thing, but it's got to be codified. We've got to put that into law to protect people's rights, build it into the systems, and then don't even have it as an option. I think that's how we move forward there. The other thing to keep in mind, you bring up China. When we talk about putting identity documents online, and you hear a lot of pushback, people talk about the database. Well, I don't want the government to have access to all of that information. And it's funny because with a lot of those people, I want to say, like, you realize the government is who creates the vast majority of that information? Right, like your birth certificate that proves that you were born comes from the government. Your social security number is in a government database. Your driver's license, including your driver's license number and the address on it, are in a government database. Marriage certificate is in a government database. All of that information, even the health department has a big list of every vaccine you've ever received. These are all in government databases. So the government already has access to all this information. The key is for them to turn ownership of that information over to you. So, for example, I could go into my database and I could erase my marriage certificate. But because I have the NFT'd version of it on my phone and in my email, even if the government, i.e. China, for example, were to erase me from their records, I could come back and show you that document and you could verify that that document exists on a blockchain. Globally, this has huge benefits. For example, let's take in theory that the Taliban's going to take over Afghanistan and take away all rights from women. And those women have to leave the country as quickly as they can, and they don't have time to stop at home and get their birth certificate. If that birth certificate is minted with a blockchain seal, when they show up at a UN camp in Syria, they can show that and that can be verified and their identity can be verified and they can be expedited and get out of there as quickly as possible, right? And the Taliban made it so that women couldn't own bank accounts. So the vast majority of the women converted all of their money into crypto wallets, out of their bank accounts into crypto wallets so that they could still have that autonomy. So if a government was going to try to oppress a whole group of people, whether that be based on gender or in China, based on race, or based on your political speech because you donated to truckers, if you can independently verify all of your identity documents and you can still spend capital, then you still retain those freedoms. And we have to show people that we're implementing systems that are actually allowing them to retain their ownership rather than be like China.
How does that play out with, well, especially some of the more stricter governments are starting to outlaw things specifically because they see it going that direction. And I've heard of various proposals being floated in the U.S. Congress that would limit things, and how do we work around that?
That's why we codify it. That was my first example. This is why we need Jefferson Moss's bill on digital documents to pass the state. And then once we have model legislation for the state of Utah, we want to get other states to adopt that model legislation. And then we want Congressman Curtis and Senator Lee to run that legislation in DC for us. Because if we've codified the ability to have digital documents, then they can't shut it down. And if we lead the way here in Utah County, showing how to do it in a self-sovereign way that preserves natural rights and privacy, then those are the systems that will be adopted in other places. That's why I think it's so important that we lead the way. Right? Yeah.
On a question, kind of on a different topic, but we have a lot of new technology companies and startup companies in Utah County, and I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how those technology companies can approach the county, work with the county. For example, we have companies that are doing like thermal recognition cameras on the mountains to see if they catch wildfires before they actually start, because it's getting hot over there. We have cameras that can detect avalanches before they happen and warn people. We have drones that can fly over the lake and scan it, and then barges that can go scoop up all the algal bloom, completely automated potentially. We have people who can sensors in county roads and help directly manage the traffic systems. We have a lot of other technology. We have drones that can plant trees in county lands and mountains and things like that, just automate the tree planting and growing trees. There's a lot of technologies we have, so what's the best way for our technology companies to approach Utah County government? And get permission to do these things, or work with the county? Do you have any
Yeah,
tips on that?
I think the most efficient and effective way to approach government for any of these services is, number one, to find an advocate within the government. So oftentimes that's going to start with, in a city council member, or a staffer at the county level. It could be a county commissioner like myself. If it's roads projects, that's gonna be our public works division. I think a lot of people think they would immediately go to like the people that do contracts and purchasing, but that's actually not your best road. Your best road is to find the people whose lives would be affected by your technology, and then find an advocate there and have them shepherd you through their systems.
So does that mean we probably want to stay away from your opponent?
I probably would if you embrace technology and automated systems, probably not the person for you. Yeah, it is interesting. The vast majority of the people that I talk to love the work that I've done. They love the things that I've done, and every now and again. Now, the vast majority of people that fight it don't understand the technology, right? They think that we're storing personal information, or they don't realize we're verifying identities and ages. You know, they don't actually haven't learned enough about the systems. But every now and again, you get somebody who just doesn't want any change. You know, they would love Utah County to be the Utah County that it was in the 1990s. And as much as I loved the Utah County of the 1990s, and that I'm a product of it because I grew up here, I recognize that Utah County no longer exists and never will exist again. So we need to continue the things that have made us great, we want to continue those into the future.
I'll throw in a couple of comments, but because it's recorded, I'll drop the name of the country out. There are certain countries that have cameras, and when you try to leave, they put a traffic court at the airport, because when you try to leave, they've got you on camera speeding, and they hit you up for your speeding fines before you're allowed to board your plane. So it's a bit of a shakedown, last second shakedown, before you can leave the country. We don't want government to necessarily go there. We want to be thinking about all the ways this information could go bad. One of the ways it could go bad with blockchain, you may have seen that Alphabet just recently wrote an open letter to the White House, asking the White House to be more proactive in coming out with a national quantum encryption policy. Because all blockchains that are out there now are incredibly vulnerable to quantum computing, literally going into that blockchain and editing it at will, whether it's stealing other people's Bitcoin or inserting somebody's death record so a government agency can put somebody into a country and have a real identity for someone who's dead. There are lots of ways that this can go bad. Have you been looking at some of those ways, like blockchain editing and quantum computing and things like that?
Yeah, so one of the things to look towards is you want like a blockchain maturity model. So typically in government, we shouldn't be adopting any blockchain that hasn't reached at least a minimum standard on a blockchain maturity model, right? And that's one reason why. The farther something goes down in the blockchain, or the more nodes that blockchain has, then the more resilient it's going to be to those things, right? Like it's one thing to say go down and insert, but for example, if you were to go and try to insert something into a record on the Ethereum blockchain that was back 6 months, the amount of quantum computing that you would have to have just currently doesn't exist to get to that level. And so that's why it's important that we're utilizing blockchains that have a blockchain maturity model, that have a critical mass of nodes. Now, well, I say nothing that it's unhackable. No, there's nothing that's unhackable. But I got to tell you right now, the nation states of the world, especially the bad acting ones, have been trying, and they haven't been there yet. That's also why open source technology is so helpful and good, because when you've got enough people looking at it, then it's going to be a lot harder to do that.
There are always people that fall through the cracks, and you've got to have some way of dealing with people that fall through the cracks. And for example, people in foreign service, people who are used to be born on ships over, in transit from one country to the other, and there used to be a way to process that. These days, people they're unaware of what it means when it says the letter O for born overseas. It means they were born in transit between two countries, or born on an airplane between two countries. That doesn't happen as much as it used to be on ships. But those kind of exceptions to rules, and contrary to what you normally think, Those are the things that your online system has to be able to accommodate. And perhaps the most important issue that we should address, because some of us here are in broadband, is digital inclusion. What are your thoughts and ideas, and what can we do to help digital inclusion? Because not everybody has access to online technology.
Right. So that's why you still should have those manual processes available. You know, if you have a child born here in the United States in a hospital. So actually, I have 3 examples. I've had 3 children myself, and I had one in a hospital in North Carolina, and the hospital gave me a little certificate of live birth, and then in the mail, seems like magically, a birth certificate shows up from the state of North Carolina, and a Social Security card shows up from the Social Security Administration because the hospital took care of that. My second baby was born in Canada. And so I didn't automatically get a Social Security card for that baby. I had to go to the consulate. And I had to show the consulate my certificate of live birth. And then in Canada, they don't automatically send you a birth certificate. You have to order one of those. And then as soon as the birth certificate, and by the way, when I showed up at the consulate, I showed up at the consulate with a 6-day-old baby with a certificate of live birth. I have no birth certificate, right? The consulate gives me a temporary letter to get across the border with my 6-day-old baby to get home. And then after 6 weeks, I can order a birth certificate from the country of Canada, ship that to the consulate, then the consulate then ships us a Social Security card and, and a birth certificate. Well, my third baby was born here in Lehi at a birth center, right? So then I had to take an affidavit from my midwife and bring it down to the county health department and get that. So you're gonna have those loopholes, but if we can serve with the current technology, if we can take care of 80 or more % of our citizens, but then still leave manual processes available for those loopholes, then we're still covering those areas. Now, that might not be as convenient for those people, but once again, if we're serving the other 80% in a more automated way, then it actually gives us more manpower and time to be able to focus on the exceptions.
But what about digital inclusion? For economically disadvantaged, do you think the government has a role in providing free or affordable internet?
Right now, the Biden administration thinks so, because we've got the ARPA dollars that one of the things it can be used on is broadband, and there are a lot of federal grants for that as well. Yeah, as things move more digital, that becomes more of a reliance. And it's actually, that's the way a lot of things are moving, particularly in third world countries, right? They don't have any access to internet, but they can get a cell phone. They don't have a laptop, but they can get a cell phone, right? And so I think as we move forward, that becomes more of a standard of living.
Are there any foreign countries that you would look to for best practices? Like Brazil has their digital forest program that's over 30 years old. Are you familiar with any other foreign countries doing
As far as the digital, as far as
e-government,
broadband
as far
goes?
as e-government services? You can go to Brazil and be in the Amazon rainforest, and if you have connectivity, you can do business with the government and do the things that need to be done, pay taxes or whatever. And it seems like they're a lot further ahead
Some
than we
countries are. So now, Brazil's a little bit of an exception there, but the vast majority of countries, the more wealthy the country is, the farther along it is. So you're gonna have significantly different standards, for example, in Western Europe than even Eastern Europe. But the more advanced nations tend to lean more towards that. And I also think as we get more satellite internet and it becomes more widely available, and then those prices come down, I think you will see a greater role. So I work with the National Association of Counties on the Telecommunications and Technology Board, so we deal a lot with broadband connectivity.
Yeah.
One of the issues we have is that there are huge federal grants available to make sure that everywhere is covered, but the maps that the FCC has are so incredibly outdated, and you can't get a grant to cover an area that the map shows is covered. But a lot of times it shows it's covered. This is one of the areas we're working on, because a provider claims they cover that area, so they've almost like staked their territory, but they haven't actually implemented a good coverage yet. And in fact, there's a lot of effort being worked on that. Congressman Curtis works on that regularly with some of the committees he's on. And then I know just from being on the National Telecommunications and Technology Organization, the board, that is a big area that we're working on, is trying to get better maps so that we can get grants to the places that need them. But connectivity is a huge thing, and I think COVID has shown that.
Any other questions? Or I could go on for hours with you, Amelia, we'll chat.
Really, Charles?
So I've got the MID app that the state is dating, I
Yeah.
guess. But I can't actually use it as my driver's license, which was the main reason why I got it, because I use my wallet all the time. But in terms of that whole thing, of course, there's individual establishments that need to accept it. There's cities, states, and counties. Is that kind of a piecemeal thing that happens over time, or is there any kind of coordinated effort?
So right now it's just piecemeal. Right now it's just piecemeal because it's in beta test, and so it's kind of more of an opt-in thing. As far as cities and states or agencies, that's where getting laws that will require that, that's where those come in. Right, so Jefferson Moss's law not only allows for digitally certified documents, but it would also require that state agencies accept them. And when they say state agencies, he could also specify political subdivisions, because counties and cities are technically political subdivisions of the state. So we as individual states, we are individual entities who work together to create a federal government, but it doesn't work the same way inside a state. The counties are not independent counties that together create a state. It's actually the opposite. Counties were created because it was too long of a horse ride to get to Salt Lake to file your documents. So the state actually created counties, and the idea was you shouldn't need more than a one-day horse ride from your county seat so that you could get in and file documents with the state. So everything that counties and cities do, they do within the bounds of state law. So basically having the state say, this shall be, would do that.
And along those lines, so I heard that in Florida, well, of course, part of the big NFT thing is not just the image, it's that everything can eventually go that way. And I heard in Florida that they're already allowing home purchases from individual sale to individual sale via NFT. Is there, as part of this digital documents law, a provision for NFTs as a form of?
Yeah, but not, we actually do have a digital asset law that passed this year, that became law May 4th, that established the legal property ownership for digital assets. But that has not yet, at least not here in Utah, that has not transferred to the physical world. So you can transfer a digital asset from peer-to-peer, but at this time, you can't use that digital asset that would be like an NFT for a home or for a car. But I can see it definitely getting set up that way.
It's 1 o'clock now, so.
Thank you so much for letting me come.